Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Balagan Conversations. We're trying out a new format here, and the idea is that we will have three Jews talking about all the news and giving you at least 9, 10, 12 different opinions and views about everything that's going on. This is David Tal from the Balagan Connection. We have Olivier Melnick, and I will hand it over to him to explain who and what and how he connects to this.
So, three Jews, views, and news. That's what we're gonna do.
And a lot of talking.
That sounds great. I'm Olivier Melnick. You can also find me on Shalom in Messiah on YouTube, as well as Olivier's devotional, two different YouTube channels. And if you want to visit our website, it's shalominmessiah.com. And if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll find videos with David Tal because I invite him regularly.
Yes, we do have a back and forth ping pong kind of event, and we asked Robb Schwartz to join us. Rob, tell us about yourself.
Well, thanks to you guys. I've known Olivier now for many years. I've just gotten to know David now in the last year or so, and so we've formed a little, kind of a little fun Balagan connection here of our own. I am the congregational leader of Ben David Messianic Jewish Congregation in Orange, California. I don't have any actual social media presence right now. We'll see what the future brings. But in our congregation, we have a pretty balanced group of folks that love all of these subjects, and hopefully we can find a way to inform you as well as entertain you in the next few minutes.
So, what's interesting about this dynamic is that we have some things in common, some things that are different. I think the most important thing that's in common is we're all Jews, and then it comes with a lot of the different things that we'll probably be kind of bringing about. The difference is where we come from or how we've come to here. I was born in the States but raised in Israel. Olivia, a little bit about your background.
I was born in Paris, France, in the late 50s of Holocaust survivors, and I moved to the States in 1985.
Rob?
I'm born and raised in Southern California. So we have in a sense, a transplanted Israeli Jew here with David. Olivier, of course, from Europe originally. And I'm just a local kid here from Southern California, born and raised. My parents, of course, are both Jewish. My mom was a Canadian import. She was born up there, moved to Baltimore, and eventually to Southern California. My dad's family, with Hungarian roots, came to the United States in the 1880s and set up shop here in California in the 30s, just before World War II. An interesting little side note here, my grandfather was in the Navy uniform business, and he actually helped outfit the entire crew of the USS Arizona before the Arizona was blown up in Pearl Harbor. So my parents have deep roots here in Southern California and lots of great stories. So I grew up as in a conservative Jewish household, not particularly religious, certainly, but part of the larger Jewish community here. Bar mitzvah at 13, and then, like many of us as Messianic Jewish believers, kind of went our own way, and eventually came back to the Lord in my late 20s, in roughly 1980, and I've been part of a couple of Messianic congregations in this area, and just through the years, I've met these gentlemen and through my travels, and it's been an interesting, time here. So here we are.
Hey, David, we told you who we were. You didn't tell us who you are.
Well,
Yeah.
born in the States, but my parents were Messianic before they left the United States to move to Israel. So I grew up in Israel from the age of 5 as a Messianic Jew and in the Messianic community in Israel. And fascinating. Maybe one of these days we will talk about the difference between the Messianic community here and the Messianic community there, which is very, very fascinating. I grew up as a PK, as a pastor's son, but in the Jewish environment, meaning being persecuted before being the Christian in the Jewish homeland. Later on, at the age of 18, like most of us, I walked away, married a non-believing, non-Christian wife, joined the military, saw action in Lebanon, Jenin, West Bank, Sinai, Gaza and everywhere else that Israel has seen action. I'm a tank commander by trade, meaning I commanded a company of tanks for 6 years and then another 30 years of reserve, 1 month a year for 30 years. I've lost my tanks a little bit lately, and I kind of miss them right now. And now I'm living in the United States, married to a wonderful Christian believer who's turned my life upside down. So, but we've got the Jews down. How about the news? I'd like to take, if we can do 3 minutes each, a little bit of news, each one in its own zone. I'm going to use my zone as Israel, and I'm going to say this. We are living in very amazing times because everything is changing. The elections in the United States has brought a massive change in what's going on in the Middle East. The war in Gaza is winding down. The war in Lebanon has kind of been put on a burner. We've pushed the Iranians back into their hole, at least for a while. And the Trump effect that has come ever since the election is changing the Middle East. Marco Rubio literally left Israel a couple of hours ago and flew to Saudi Arabia. I think the American envoy is in Saudi Arabia. There's talk about a lot of agreements going on. And there's a smell of a mega deal that President Trump is going to bring together in the Middle East. We can go into that a little bit deeper if we want to do that. But that's a little bit of the backdrop of what we're talking about right now. Somebody else.
Yeah, let me jump into this. We are all watching this news every single day as another uncovering. We could go down the road of Doge, right? The Elon Musk efforts, and it seems like one thing is connected to the other. The thing that really hit me today, I just saw just a quick article this morning about a woman that was protesting on one of the campuses, and they were talking about arresting her and charging her with felonies for harassing and blocking and whatever happened to Jewish students on her campus. And that whole thing blew up in the spring of 2024. There's a fine line here in America dealing with constitutional rights, freedom of speech, and all of that. And when do you cross the line between your right to say something and then harassment and violence? And so now there's a turning of the tide, it seems like, where a lot of these students are going to be charged with possible crimes for against the Jewish students in those various campuses. So I'm watching that story very closely.
And
Olivier, this in Paris, what we're talking about here is much, much worse.
what the way they treat the Jews?
Yeah, the whole dynamic of I mean the how do you deal with the demonstrations and how do you
Yeah,
deal with
well, first I want to answer to something that Rob said. I want to comment on something he said, talking about when do you cross the line. Rob, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but that would
Why
me
should
that
today
would
be any different?
that that wouldn't be the first time. Why should this not be any different, right?
wait a
It
minute.
would
Are we Jewish or are we not Jewish?
we're
We got five
Jewish,
opinions.
So, but I think that I'm all in favor of freedom of speech. I really am.
Of course.
We should really all be, because when you have zero freedom of speech, then you have like places like Nazi Germany, and you know what happened. Uh, but I think to me, you cross the line where lives are in danger. So you can say whatever you want. I don't care. You're free to say whatever you want. But if you say something that puts my life or the life of somebody else in danger, that's when you've crossed the line. That's when you've gone too far. What do you think, Rob?
Well, I remember the congressional discussion that was happening about how the colleges were treating the anti-Semitism in the
Yep.
colleges. And that was exactly the different that the dynamic. I mean, where does it cross a line? And the thing that the president of Harvard, I think, was saying is that if it's not acted on, it's not anti-Semitism. So I can call for the death of Jews, I can call for the death of Israelis, but if I don't actually take a gun and shoot a Jew, then it's not anti-Semitism. And I think the world has and by the way, that was the progressive mindset for a long time. I think the world is starting to understand that there is a discussion that needs to be had. Not everything can be said. And look at what's happening, for instance, in American politics. I don't know if you're watching what's going on with The View, and that everybody is now suing Whoopi Goldberg, who is not Jewish, by the way. Let's make that clear, for things that she has said online. There is a conversation about what can be said. That conversation is going on in Israel, by the way, in all kinds of political connections there. It's going on in Europe big time, and it's going on in the United States big time. And I'm not surprised that the center of the controversy, and we're going to see this as we go along, the center of the controversy is always the Jewish people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting point. Go ahead, Olivier.
No,
Go
I
ahead
was
and
just going to add one more thing that because this connects, and this might be something that we've discussed in a previous show, but it's worth repeating. This connects with the idea of what constitutes a genocide, and not that this would be my primary source for anything, but on the United Nations website there is a definition of genocide, because that's one place where you would expect to find it. And in their definition, do they apply it well or not? That's for another day. But in their definition, they say that all you need to define genocide is intent. They're not looking at numbers. Intent is all you need. So when you have young people on American campuses and campuses in France and other parts of the world saying, from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free, that is, if you know the meaning of what you're saying, a genocidal statement. All of Israel shall be free of Jews. It will be all becoming Palestine, or returning to Palestine that it used to be, which of course it never was. So all you need is intent. So for the people, the president of Harvard was, what was her name, Claudine Gay, I think, for her to say that if you don't really mean it, if you don't act upon it, it's no. If I go on the streets of where I live and I say I want to kill black people, I want to kill all black people, I hate the blacks, then that becomes intent, and that is genocidal speech.
Which,
it's
again,
provocative for sure.
I mean, we're all Jewish. We've all heard in the stories about our people, in the stories about our families, and I mean, we probably have family members who could probably say the same thing, that they watched the people yelling, "Kill the Jews," and they didn't really believe it. And I mean, I could go back to the Spanish Inquisition. I could go back to the Holocaust, and for decades, we Jews have heard these yells, and we've tried not to believe it, and we're back in the same place that we were.
There was even during the Crusades, during the first Crusades, like you go back to 1096 as the first Crusade, there was a statement of some people were saying, "Kill a Jew, save your soul. Kill a Jew, save your soul."
David,
so that's
David, you made an amazing statement not long ago, dealing with your perspective as an Israeli, but after the war started, suddenly your Jewishness became a far more important thing. And it's interesting, as we mentioned, the Israeli Jewish community, I mean, most of the people there obviously are Jewish, but the Israeli Jews and the American Jews are not necessarily the same. But the war for those Jewish people on this side of the pond versus those in Israel, for those of us that are paying attention, there's far more common ground being struck here, because this was considered by many, at least, and I think within this conversation, certainly the latest pogrom of one that has gone back hundreds, if not thousands of years. So we're looking, in fact, many people are equating it with the worst day since the Holocaust of Jewish deaths in Israel on October 7th. But more to the point, it wasn't just Jews being killed, it was the method by which they were being killed and the outpouring of hate that was coming from Gaza, and the next day from Hezbollah, and not soon after that down there in Yemen. So what you ended up with here was, you might call it an international Holocaust. This wasn't just generated from one nation. Israel's fighting a seven-front war. What's interesting to me, and I think it needs to be said to anybody that's watching this, Christians, Jews, I don't really care who you are, the Christian community, for those that are paying attention, friends of ours like Tom Hughes's communities and Brandon Holthouse's communities and others, they're watching and they know exactly what's going on. But to the larger Christian community, this is not something that seems to concern them. It happens one at a time. And when I see a Christian, biblically founded, biblically based Christian, that begins to react to Jewish issues, I take heart in that because I realize we're not alone. But there's a lot of ground to gain. And the last point I wanted to make was it seems to me that, and you've heard this said, I keep my friends close, but my enemies closer. And in saying that, you look around and you go, you know what? I need to understand what's going on beyond my borders. So the ability to keep an eye on everything that's going on around us and making sure that we understand not only actions, but somebody here mentioned intent, Olivier. When it could be Muslim on Muslim violence in Syria or Lebanon, nobody cares. But as soon as the Jews are involved, suddenly the world is, the Jews are the ones shooting. They had no trouble with us running us through the camps in World War II. But the minute a Jew begins to defend himself, then there's a problem. So that's my take on it.
David,
we
David, to answer your question, if you want me to, about
please.
France, I'll just tell you that from my own contacts in French and my own research, uh, French Jews are basically very very scared to publicly show their Jewish identity. So it's going to be very rare, even in the Jewish areas, to see Jewish people wearing a yarmulke without a hat on, like a baseball cap. Uh, Stars of David's or T-shirts with Jewish symbols or Jewish letters um, are not going to be displayed. I mean, couple of years ago, that's even before October 7th. There was an incident on the Paris subway where a man who turned out that he was not Jewish was reading a book in Hebrew, and he got beat up on the subway because the cover had the Hebrew letters, and it turned out he was not even Jewish. That's how far people are going. French Jews are scared. My own family, they're all doing their papers to make Aliyah to go back to Israel under
Yeah.
the law, the Aliyah, which means the law of return. And France, in the last 15 to 20 years, has lost at least 10% of its Jews. Went from 500 to 450,000 going back to Israel. And David, you know better than all of us on this podcast how difficult it is to make a living in Israel.
Yeah. How difficult it is to live among Jews in Israel.
They do say, and David, maybe you can confirm, if you want to be a millionaire in Israel, you have to arrive as a billionaire.
Yeah, well, I like that one. Though there are now wholesale French communities in Israel. I don't know if you know, Netanya has become almost completely French.
Yes.
Places like that. But
I'm
I want
sorry for you guys.
don't get me started. I lived in Paris for 2 years. I mean, we
That's
got
right.
that. But I want to connect the other part of this because, and again, connect to what Rob said before. As an Israeli, we always felt ourselves different from the Jews in Europe and the Jews in America, and we thought that we were prouder, more capable, safer. We would, celebrate Jewish history and Jewish ceremonies because they all celebrate people who want to kill us. We have a Holocaust Day, but there was a feeling that we as Israelis are how do you say, in a different place than the Jews have been down through the ages. And what happened on October 7th was we were reminded that we're Jews just like everybody else. And that is something deeply profound for Israelis because again, the Jews in the diaspora understand that, I think, a little bit better. But Israelis never had a problem, and now Israelis are going around the world hiding their Star of David, okay, and afraid to be. I think there was an Israeli soldier that was arrested in Brazil because he took part in what happened in Gaza, and all of a sudden we're all reminded that the stories that we heard about our grandparents and our great grandparents and this all of a sudden is happening to us. And I think that has been one of the most profound differences from the Israeli point of view. How are the Jews in the diaspora kind of accepting this? Because there's a feeling in my mind that a lot of them are becoming more connected to their Judaism.
Yeah, I actually would slightly disagree. I would say, I would say that they're getting connected to their Jewishness, not necessarily their Judaism,
I got you.
because there is a difference, and we all three of us know it. The Jewishness is the Yiddishkeit, the Jewish connection. You know, we have Jewish stories, Jewish music, Jewish heritage, Jewish culture, food. Judaism is something that you practice more
Don't
or
forget the
less.
jokes.
What?
Yeah, they're
Don't
jokes.
forget the
Don't
jokes.
forget the jokes, right?
Well,
And
Hollywood. I mean, let's take Hollywood under
Yeah.
this. At least
I-
the old Hollywood, not the new
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
right. So yeah, I think a connection to a global connection to Jewishness, which I think could be good because it should allow us to it should open doors for more dialogue. I recently, and this is not really it doesn't involve Israel so much, but I met a rabbi of a Chabad house in my area, and I had coffee with him, and I sent him an email saying, "Hey, you and I don't believe the same. I'm a Jew, believe that Yeshua, Jesus, is the Messiah of Israel, and He's the Savior of the world, and I believe and follow Him now for 40 years." So we do. I know we don't agree on theologically, but in the eyes of an anti-Semite, you are as Jewish as I am. I am as Jewish as you are. Can we meet for coffee? Responded immediately. We had coffee and we agreed. We agreed that we were both Jews in the eyes of an anti-Semite, and when it comes to fighting anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, we need to work together. Not just the Jews and the Christians really need to work together, but Jews within the Jewish community, the Jews who don't agree, we know Jewishness, Judaism is a very broad spectrum, okay?
Mhm.
But when it comes to those who want to kill us, we have to hold hands. We have to work together.
No, there's only one Jew.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Olivia, this brings up an interesting point. That one of my areas of interest over the years has been what happened to the Jewish believers in Europe before the war, before World War II. And my research has carried me to a couple of different places, one of which was an amazing discovery to me that there was a very robust believing Jewish community before the war. The question is, where did they go in Europe? And many of them, if not most of them, were hauled off to the camps by the Germans, who did not discern any difference between the Jews that believed in Jesus or Yeshua and those that did not. I had a conversation not long ago with a very good friend of mine. Now, she happens to be a female Reformed rabbi, and she was having a little problem with my belief. But at the end of the conversation, she looked at me. She goes, "I still see you as Jewish." And I said, "I am. Nothing has changed. Even though I believe that Jesus or Yeshua is the Messiah, and I believe we can support that scripturally and historically and all that, my Jewish roots are still my Jewish roots. I can't change that.
No.
You can talk to a Jewish person who's become an atheist. Are they Jewish? Yeah. A Jewish person can become a Hindu, or, frankly, it can be anything, and they're still Jewish. This whole thing about Jesus is another whole issue. But we see through a biblical lens, and, frankly, I asked a group of secretaries when I was working for a big company here many years ago, how many of you believe that Paul converted to Christianity? And all the hands went up. And then I said, well, okay, let's talk about this one. How many of you believe that Jesus converted to Christianity? And the hands were not so sure, And I thought to myself, it's interesting what people get taught in synagogues or what they get taught in churches or what they're reading. It's very interesting. And so I have a real interest in the historicity and the accuracy and the transparency of the scripture to make sure that what we teach we can stand on and make it, I'm not going to say provable so much as saying, look, this is my position, these are my sources, let's have a discussion.
Well, this is fascinating, but I want to change subject because we don't have a lot of time, and I want to get one thing out. And again, I'm looking at these three faces, and this is going to be interesting because one of the things I've been hearing since the war was a attempt by the enemy or the different enemies to separate Jews from Zionists, Jews from Israel. You're Jewish, you're not Israeli, and I was kind of curious because again, going back to what we said before, we realize that we're Israeli, but we're Jewish. We're Jewish, but we're Israeli. They hate us in Israel because we're Jewish. and the enemy is saying that.
Yep.
But what do you, as Jews who are part of the congregations and the communities here, how do you feel about the attempt to separate Judaism from Israel? And maybe just to put this in context, because this is really interesting, the excuse for anti-Semitism today is Israel. There's been excuses in the past. In the past, it was because we were baking matzah with the blood of Christian children, or we were the reason for the Black Plague, or we were the world's economic downfall.
Which are
But
all
now,
lies, by the way. They're all lies.
totally. But here's the thing: now it's Israel. What has happened? How has this happened to us again?
I think that the way you can look at it is that the, at the foundation you need to understand, and I think I say this in just about every podcast that I have a chance, to say it, is that anti-Semitism is a creation of Satan, and so Satan has to be creative because what happened is that after the war, 1945, Second World War. The last thing you wanted to advertise as something that was really cool and happening was, Nazi racial anti-Semitism. It was like, okay, it's taboo. We don't want to talk about it. So Satan is going, okay, I'm going to have to repackage that beast because I cannot bring it that way anymore. So he had to repackage it. And what he did, he managed, and it took several decades, but he managed to switch the perpetrators and the victims. So now the victims are the perpetrators are the victims. It's completely switched around. In 1948, Israel became a nation, and all of a sudden, Zionism is this colonization and taking over, and that is the new problem in the Middle East. So people are saying like, well, I'm not really anti-Semitic. I'm just anti-Zionist. It was Martin Luther King who said anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, going back to the 60s. And there's no difference. Can you disagree with things that the Israeli government is proposing or doing? Of course you can.
Well, I disagree with a lot of things my government is doing.
You're not anti-Zionist.
No.
And so it's all in how you define Zionism. When you define Zionism as a movement that is trying to colonize and push people out of their own country and commit genocide and commit ethnic cleansing and build a government of apartheid to keep people out, then you're pushing all the buttons that in our day and age are going to get a reaction from the people that are interested in social justice, but are not at all interested in learning history. Rob?
Well, Olivier, I want to build on that because David, we saw some of that theming come out in the conference we just went to this weekend. You have to understand the history of colonization, and watching one group put feet on a territory that originally didn't belong to them, and suddenly they own that. That is really part and parcel of the whole history of Islam. The two-state solution doesn't exist. The one-state solution in Israel does, but it's not a Jewish state. Islam wants all of it. They want no Jewish presence there. I was going to add this. To me, you cannot separate God from the land, from the people, and from the language. And all four are present today in Israel. That language that was revived by Ben Yehuda back in the turn of the 19th and 20th century, there isn't an Israeli alive today. Even the Arabs that are involved in Israeli society, they speak two languages. They speak Hebrew. The children are raised speaking Hebrew. They can read Hebrew. You can take the Dead Sea Scrolls, any of the scrolls that they unearthed from those caves, you can put in front of a Jewish child and they can read that scripture. So for 2,000 years, the culture always goes, it spreads through the language and it spreads through the people's, just their life in the nation. And so there it is. It's all present today. And my guess is if you put a Jesus, a Yeshua in modern day Israeli society, he might see some things he doesn't like, but he would certainly feel comfortable because he would recognize everything that he sees. Just saying.
So again, the enemy is trying to disassociate people, land, and God. And I think most of us would agree that this is the core issue, and he's done it economically in the past. He's done it racially in the past. And now, to a certain extent, he's doing it political. But these are still the same versions of the same idea. And we as Jews recognize that. And again, the way this comes together is we as Israelis together today recognize it more than ever. And maybe this is a point that I want to bring up, that the three of us, I think, are very unique in connecting, because there's a role for the greatest Jew who ever lived to play in all of this. And his name is Yeshua. And what do you think, or do you feel, or is there a moving where our people who have been anti-Yeshua for so long are can be more open or more accepting of the greatest Jew that was ever walked the earth?
Um, well, I tell you what. Um, I've
I
been
got him.
what?
I got you. You're thinking deep on this one.
Uh, well, I've been teaching on the topic of anti-Semitism for 2.5 decades now, almost, going on 3 decades. And I think that I've never seen a time such as the time that we're in right now, where we had so many opportunities to mesh humanitarian work with gospel sharing. And that is actually what prompted me to make a move away from a ministry I was part of for 26 years that I really loved being part of, and I still very much hold very, very close to my heart. But I had to make that move so that I could be doing what I'm doing with Shalom and Messiah. And I see opportunities opening right now that did not exist before, things we could not even fathom, comprehend. And I think that if we grab those opportunities, you as a Jew from Israel, Rob as a Jew from America, me and French Jew, but really I live in America now. If we grab those opportunities, we can make a difference where introducing who Yeshua is, what he's done, and what he wants to do with the rest of the Jewish community of the world. I think we can actually have some success.
Rob is itching.
Yeah, I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, this is a developing story.
Yeah.
I was telling,
Now this is sounding like the news.
I
Developing
know, right?
story.
Do you know what's amazing? Yeah, Film 111. Do you know what's amazing to me? It's not just what's happening, but it's the speed at what's happening.
Yeah.
And it's happening all over the world. I mean, that attack in Amsterdam just a couple of months ago on the Jews that went to the soccer game there, the soccer games, it's happening in France, it's happening in Germany, the Jews all over the world, Australia, of all people, all places, Australia. I never heard of anything like this until the last couple of months. And it's, America still has a Jewish community that is largely not moving yet, but there are pockets that are beginning to awaken. And that gives me encouragement that at least they're starting to talk about what they're seeing. So I keep thinking to myself, it's the activities that are going on, but the speed at which things are happening and the role of the Messianic believer, Jewish or Gentile, this is maybe the greatest opportunity we have ever had to share the gospel. I've talked to neighbors, I've talked to friends, I've talked to acquaintances that I've known all my life. And I said, look, this is right out of the Bible. And, I don't know if it's making any difference, but at least I felt the freedom to say something. So the war, as horrible as everything has been, and I can't even imagine the pain and suffering that's going on in the nation now, it has given opportunity for the gospel to get out. And I'm thinking, well, the New Testament is not exactly a story of, rainbows and puppies. There's a lot of stuff that happened there, and it's we're seeing it happening again.
Well, my point, and again, maybe my unique kind of connection is I grew up in Israel trying to explain who Yeshua is. Now that that's like going into a religious Orthodox community and explaining to people who Jesus actually was. And I've always find myself, pushing up against the past anti-Semitism, the historic hatred, and everything that I have to overcome before you can even get to a point where you can even talk about anything positive. Then I'm spending time in Israel today. Israel is bleeding. And Israel is bleeding from a economic point of view. We've just now gotten our back feet underneath us from a military and political point of view, but we were bleeding for a long time. We are bleeding from a emotional point of view, and you see what's going on with the hostages coming back, and there's this feeling that everybody is against us. But when I reach out to Israelis, and again, I'm part of a ministry called Gijon Springs that is actually helping Israel right now, and you reach out to Israelis and then say, as opposed to what you see on CNN and MSNBC, and as opposed to what you hear on all the wokeness, and as opposed to what you see in the demonstrations and in the streets of Europe and in the how do you say the balagan that's going on in the universities, as opposed to all of this, we are here in the name of Jesus. And when you do that, the next question is, wait a minute, how does that work? Why? Why are Christians supporting us? Here is another example of how the Christians turn their back on us the minute we're in need. And you say, no, there are Christians all over the world that support Israel because they're followers of Jesus and not as opposed to their being followers of Jesus. And that has opened doors, at least for me, among my peers, among people, among the guys in the army that I have a WhatsApp group with. Okay, that are asking me, what's this ministry that you're working on? And I explained to them, I said, what do you mean? What? Christians are supporting us? Boom, I get to explain things that I couldn't really talk to when I was on the tank. And all of a sudden you've got a new openness. And what I would like to stress to all the people watching and listening to us is that this is a time to reach out. This is a time to reach out to our people. This is a time to show our people Christian love. This is a time to prove to our people that what they need more, and again, Iron Dome is good, and we need the Moab bombs. Did you hear about the Moab bombs that President Trump just now allowed?
The
The
mother of all bombs.
mother of all bombs. It turns out it's got a biblical name,
Yeah.
Moab. Okay. Okay. All right. And yes, we need all of that. Yes, we need Trump's support. Yes, we need all of that. But we need the Prince of Peace more than anything.
Amen.
Absolutely. Another thing that I want to challenge your audience to consider is as Christians reach out to Jewish people, and the reaction from Jewish people, like you just shared, David, is like, why do Christians do that? Why do Christians care about Israel? Why do Christians care about the Jews? The reason why you get this original maybe knee jerk reaction, kind of a response from Jewish people or from Israeli Jews, is because of the history of Christian anti-Semitism. So I would challenge the Christians to educate themselves a little bit about Jewish history through the eyes of anti-Semitism,
Amen.
so that
Yeah.
when they talk to Israelis, they say, why do you do that? Because, we heard about Christian crusades, we heard about Christian Inquisition, we heard about Christian Holocaust, we heard about the and on and on and on and on. And most Christians will go like, oh, yeah, well, I'm not sure about all this, but I'm here today to help you. So, well, so I would really encourage believers today to educate themselves so they have a little bit of an understanding of history, and so they understand why there's such a gospel resistance from Jewish people and from Israelis today. So that might be helpful.
Rob, isn't that what Ben David is doing?
We're giving it our best. You've been there, David, a couple of times, and you know that we have we have our vision statement, which is to restore the Jewishness of the gospel, and our mission statement, which is to live God's love and truth, as taught from a biblical Jewish perspective. The idea here is that we want to bring history and scripture together in such a way that the modern, both Jew and Gentile, can look at it and say, this fits this historical narrative. And when you read the scripture, you can't get through the New Testament without understanding how important the Jewish nation is to God. And the fact is that the Jews remain chosen. I mean, that's it. However, salvation is of the Jews, and Yeshua, Jesus, died for all people. So I think ourselves and other Messianic congregations around the world are doing what they can to provide an atmosphere to learn the Bible as best they can. And as Olivier said, encourage Christians to read some Jewish history and, frankly, Christian history as well. Where did all that come from? So that we can have a kind of a common ground, common basis of belief.
Well,
Absolutely.
I can't help but say it. But if you want to read the most amazing book about Jewish history that was ever written,
Or
open the
Bible.
Bible.
Yeah, you bet. You bet.
Right.
Can't help that.
Yeah.
Um, a couple of words before we kind of close this off. I want to stress two things since we are talking about what's going on. The next couple of weeks, and I feel that the last year and a half we've been saying this again and again, but the next couple of weeks seem very, very critical for what's happening in Israel, what's happening in the Middle East. We need a lot of prayer, but I'm asking my viewers and everybody who's listening to this. I think the word that I've had coming down, and again with me it comes in Hebrew, is chokhmah.
Wisdom.
We
Wisdom.
need a lot of chokhmah right now. We need a lot of chokhmah in our leaders. We need a lot of chokhmah in the people. We need a lot of chokhmah. And if there's anything I want to leave is pray for chokhmah. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu, I know needs a lot of chokhmah, but the whole echelon down below that, President Donald J. Trump has shown a lot of chokhmah, but I think he's going to need a lot of chokhmah. Chokhmah, by the way, is wisdom, smartness. I don't
You
know.
know, David, I did it. I'm not going to challenge the Hebrew, but in the research that I did, I found out that the word skill and the word wisdom is the same word in Hebrew.
It is.
So you think about it as practicing a skill and you gain more. You gain wisdom from practicing that skill. So yeah, it's
And
a
I
great language.
and I would add one more thing to chokhmah is that there is such a thing as feminine and masculine gender in Hebrew. And by the way, it's interesting that in grammar you only have two genders. Never mind. So, so, but in Hebrew, chokhmah is a feminine word. If
That's
I know,
very interesting.
so maybe we should listen to our wives more often.
Well, if we want to go down that rabbit hole, you know that the original sin was the tree of chokhmah.
That's
There you
right.
go. Knowledge.
That's right. Yeah, that maybe for
Good,
another
good
show.
and evil. Hey, we
Before
should
we
bring our
go,
wives on the next one, right?
I don't know if that is actual chokhmah, but okay, that I hope I don't get in trouble here. Uh, uh, Rob, if we want to connect to you here more, I mean, have you written? I mean, where can we find you if we want to find more things about what you're doing?
Well, of course, our congregation posts all of our sermons and any guest speakers and so forth on our website at Ben David. Uh, what is it? I'm trying to think of the name of our website right now. It's Ben David MJC, Messianic Jewish Congregation, bendavidmjc.org. They can always go there and find all of our whole library of work over 24 years. And we're looking at some other stuff right now. We don't really have much of a social media presence yet, but that's certainly on we're talking about getting something going on that one as well. So
Maybe we should talk about this afterward.
I think that would be a great conversation.
Olivier, how do we connect to you?
You go to YouTube at Shalom and Messiah Ministries, or also at Olivier's 1 Minute Devotional. Those are the two different YouTube channels. The first one has all my videos, which include quite a few videos on teaching Christians to understand anti-Semitism and Christian history and against the Jews. So that would be that would provide your audience with a lot of teaching material right there. I have over 1,000 videos on my channel and on the regular channel. And of course, if they want to visit our website and connect with us in our ministry, it's shalominmessiah.com.
And just to round this off, everything that we've been talking about, since I've been in the States, I've been connected to a ministry called Gijón Springs. You probably heard about it here. Gijón is the spring of water that bubbles out under Mount Moriah in Jerusalem and supplies water to the city of Jerusalem. And we are supporting both believing ministries and the IDF, the Israel Defense Force in Israel. So if you want to connect to that, there's a link to Gijón Springs down here. And we all are actually, I think, on the path of supporting Israel, supporting the Jewish people who need your hope, prayers, and support more than anything right now. Final words?
Absolutely. No,
Only I have only one thing to say, and that is the blessing it is for the non-Jewish Christian who comes to a perspective and understanding of Israel's role in the Bible and in the last days. And I just have such a warmth for the Gentile believer that has taken on, I'll call this messianic perspective, because that is a really hard leap from traditional Christianity, which has not always been friendly to the Jewish people. But when I see a Christian that has a love for the Jewish people, that person is my brother or my sister, and I love them. It's great.
Amen.
I can't add anything to that. I mean, I'm gonna let Rob have the final word of Chachma.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this, please leave a comment. We all live off of comments, and we love this. You're on the Balagan Connection. Actually, in this case, the Balagan Conversation. Like, share, ring the bell, subscribe. Let us know what you think. And we're planning on doing a few more of those. Take care. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and hope to see you soon.